listen to first? The Three Little Pigs.
The Three Little Pigs. Once upon a time, there was an old mother pig who had 3 little pigs and not enough food to feed them. So when they were old enough, she gave them each 1 gold piece and said, "I love each of you very much. Now take this money, use your talents and go and create good lives for yourselves." And then she sent them out into the world to seek their fortunes. The first little pig was very lazy.
Oh, man! 1 gold piece! Mother could have given me more than that.
He didn't want to work at all, but he needed a place to sleep. He took his gold coin and found a man selling straw.
This straw is light and easy to lift. It won't take me any time at all to build a house.
And sure enough, before you could say, he built himself a little house made of straw.
Well, that was easy.
And he crawled into his little straw house and took a nap. The second little pig was also lazy, but he at least had a little more determination than his brother. He took his gold coin and found a man selling sticks.
These aren't too heavy. It shouldn't take much time to build myself a house of sticks.
And that is what he did. It took him a little longer. But by the time he was finished, he still had a lot of sunlight left. So he went and woke his first brother. They played and danced together for the rest of the day.
Come and join us!
But the third little pig did not join them.
I can play later. I need a house. A strong house.
So he went from town to town until he found a man selling bricks.
They are perfect. I am not afraid of hard work.
And he wasn't. He worked hard all day and the next and built his house out of solid brick. It was a sturdy house, complete with a fine fireplace and chimney.
Perfect.
The next day, a wolf happened to pass by the lane where the 3 little pigs lived. The wolf saw the straw house, and he smelt the pig inside.
Smells like breakfast.
The wolf knocked on the door and said,
Little pig, let me come in.
But the little pig saw the wolf's big paws through the keyhole, and he answered back,
No! Not by the hairs on my chinny chin chin!
The wolf bared his teeth.
Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down.
And so he huffed, and he puffed, and he blew the house down. The wolf opened his jaws very wide and lunged. But the first little pig escaped and ran away to hide with the second little pig. The wolf continued down the lane, and he passed by the second house made of sticks. He could smell the pigs inside.
Smells like lunch.
The wolf knocked on the door and said,
Little pigs, let me come in.
But the little pig saw the wolf's pointy ears through the keyhole, and they answered back,
No! Not by the hairs on our chinny chin chin!
The wolf snarled and said,
Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down.
And so he huffed, and he puffed, and he blew the house down. The wolf was greedy and pounced, trying to catch both pigs at once.
Eek!
Screamed the pigs, and they split up. His big jaws snapped down on nothing but air, and the 2 little pigs scrambled away as fast as their little hooves would carry them. The wolf chased them down the lane, nipping at their heels. He nearly caught them, But the little pigs made it to the brick house and slammed the door just in time. The 3 little pigs were very frightened, for they knew the wolf wanted to eat them. The wolf hadn't eaten all day, and he had worked up a large appetite chasing the pigs around. Now he could smell all 3 of them inside the brick house, and he knew that the little pigs would make a lovely feast.
Smells like dinner.
The wolf knocked on the door and said,
Little pigs, let me come in.
but the little pigs saw the wolf's yellow eyes through the keyhole, and they answered back,
No, no, no!
Not by the hairs on our chinny chin chins!
The wolf growled and said,
Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down.
well, he huffed and he puffed. He puffed and he huffed. And he huffed, and he puffed, but he could not blow the brick house down. At last, he was too out of breath to huff and puff any more, and he stopped to rest. The sly wolf spied the chimney and decided he would slide down it and gobble up the little pigs for his supper. But the little pigs heard the wolf climbing onto the roof, and they all worked together and quickly built up a blazing fire and put on a big pot full of water to boil. Then, just as the wolf was coming down the chimney, one little pig pulled off the lid and plop! In fell the wolf. The wolf yelled, and he and his boiled behind went running down the lane, never to bother the pigs again. The 3 little pigs cheered.
Hooray! You saved us from the wolf! Thank you, brother!
But your houses, they are gone.
It's okay. We can make new ones. This time we will work much, much, much harder.
And they did, because this time they used
The bricks.
bricks. The end.
Cinderella.
Cinderella, based on the story by the Brothers Grimm. Long ago, there was a kind young girl named Ella who lost the mother she adored. Her father remarried a woman with 2 daughters. After the wedding, her father told Ella, I'm happy I found someone warm and caring to nurture you while I'm gone. Then he left for his work in faraway kingdoms. The day he left, the stepmother and her daughters showed their true faces. Ella went to sit with them in the sitting room, and the stepmother smiled at her coldly.
Did you think you'd keep company with us? From now on, you are to rise before daybreak and carry the water, light the fires, do the cooking, and wash until late in the evening.
You're our kitchen maid now, ridiculous girl. Get out. Go and do the chores.
The sisters took pleasure in making more work for Ella's tired hands. They dirtied clothing, spilled glasses, and even scattered peas into the fireplace.
You'll need to pick those out of the ashes, one by one.
In the evening, Ella had no bed. She slept by the grey, dusty cinders of the fireplace.
You're always so filthy. We should call you Cinderella. Oh, yes!
And from then on, that is what her stepmother and stepsisters always called her. Ella, Cinderella, missed her parents terribly. Her personality was naturally positive. However, she determined to make the best of her situation. On one particularly gloomy morning, she looked out the window and said,
There has to be a way out of this. I must come up with a plan. And as I do, a song will help. A song can help brighten the dreariest of days. Someday, I'll make things better. Someday, I'll leave this house. Someday, there'll be sunshine. Someday, the clouds will part. Someday, I'll make friends who'll laugh and warm my heart.
Her singing charmed the tiny creatures around her home. Bunnies, squirrels and birds flocked to her and danced around her ankles.
Hello, darlings.
This healed Cinderella's heart a bit, though it still was not whole. On the very hardest, loneliest days, Cinderella went to her mother's grave and wept.
I miss you, Mother.
Where her tears fell, a beautiful tree grew, and a small white bird appeared on a branch.
I am the spirit of your mother's love, sent in your hour of sadness. Tell me what wishes I may grant, to bring your heart some gladness.
Truly?
Cinderella tried to dry her tears.
Then, may I have a delicious peach?
It appeared.
A rose?
It appeared.
A book?
It too appeared.
Thank you, sweet bird. You have lightened my spirits.
Cinderella put these wonderful treasures in her pockets and hurried home. Shortly thereafter, the king made an important announcement.
We shall have a royal dance to find my son a bride. All the villagers are invited.
When the stepsisters heard this, they excitedly called Cinderella.
Come and iron my dress. Come and curl my hair.
Cinderella helped her stepsisters get ready. Then she went to her stepmother.
May I go too? It says that all are to attend.
Her stepmother stood up stiffly.
Finish your chores and you may go, but only if you are not dirty and grimy.
While Cinderella was drawing water at the well, the spiteful stepmother said to her daughters,
Quick, spill a sack of peas into the ashes and dirty all the dishes.
Then she took a large spoon and splattered jam all over the floors. Cinderella returned and was appalled at the mess.
Good luck tidying up, Cinderella.
The stepsisters sneered and laughed. Then they left for the dance. They knew Cinderella could never clean such an awful mess, and herself in time. Cinderella despaired, but then remembered the little white dove. She hurried to the tree and told the bird everything.
Can you please help me?
The bird glowed magically.
A full day's work will take less than an hour, for a mother's love holds the greatest power.
A magical wind whirled around Cinderella. She watched with astonishment as birds, squirrels, mice and rabbits streamed from the woods to her home. They quickly completed all the chores left by her wicked stepmother and vanished again into the forest.
Oh, thank you, Dove. You are very kind, all of you. However, I cannot go to the dance in these dirty clothes.
At once, tiny star-like sparks showered down from the branches of the tree and fell softly over Cinderella. In a moment, she was transformed. Her tattered dress became a lovely silk gown.
A tiara? White gloves? Glass slippers?
Cinderella thanked the bird with all her heart and hurried to the royal dance. She entered the palace, where friendly chatter and beautiful flowers surrounded her. The villagers were enjoying fine food and drinks and dancing merrily.
This is so beautiful.
Cinderella was overcome with indescribable happiness. She joined the dancing and twirled from partner to partner. She smiled and laughed more that night than she had in months. Cinderella's jubilant high spirits were contagious, and the entire room seemed to brighten in her presence.
Who on earth is that girl?
Cinderella's stepmother looked on jealously as the prince himself bowed to Cinderella. As the prince and Cinderella whirled, he too found himself smiling in response to Cinderella's laughter and her pure enjoyment of the evening. The two danced together merrily until midnight, when the music came to an end. Then the prince turned to Cinderella, took her hand and said, "Please, tell me your name. I must see you again."
I'm sorry, I can't.
It was such a perfect night. Cinderella didn't want the prince to see her as a servant in her very own home, dressed in dirty clothes with her awful stepmother and sisters ordering her around. Embarrassed, she ran off. "Wait, please!" The prince raced after Cinderella, but she disappeared into the night, leaving behind a single glass slipper sparkling in the moonlight. "Wait, please! Your slipper!" When her stepmother and stepsisters got home, they found Cinderella sleeping as usual in her dirty clothes by the fireplace. Her beautiful dress, jewelry, and one glass slipper lay hidden in a kitchen cupboard. The next morning, the prince travelled throughout the village and asked every girl to try on the glass slipper. "I want to ask the owner of this slipper to be my bride." At last, he arrived at Cinderella's house. Every other maiden in the village had already tried the slipper, and it fit no one. "The maiden I seek must live here." He knocked on the door. The two stepsisters were thrilled to see the prince. The eldest tried the slipper, but she couldn't stuff her big toes into it, no matter how she struggled.
Oh, stupid shoe!
Then the other sister tried and found it impossible to slide the dainty slipper over her bulging heel.
Stubborn foot!
"This is the last house. There must be a mistake. Have you any other daughters?" The stepmother's eyes narrowed.
None.
At that moment, Cinderella stepped lightly into the room.
That is not entirely true. She may not consider me her daughter, but there is another girl in this house.
Her stepmother scowled as Cinderella sat and easily slipped her foot into the glass slipper. The prince beamed. "I am so happy to have found you again. Please, would you come to live with me at the castle, and perhaps one day consider being my bride?" The stepmother and stepsisters looked horrified as Cinderella wrapped her arms around him.
Yes, oh yes!
The prince smiled. Then he and Cinderella rode away on his horse. As they passed by the hazel tree, the white dove sang.
Love and kindness found you, as like finds like, and now your mother's heart can rest. May all your days be warm and bright. May all your years be happy and blessed.
Eventually, the prince and Cinderella married in a beautiful wedding, and the entire village rejoiced. Cinderella and the prince loved each other forever and led full and blissful lives together. The end.
Little Red Riding Hood.
Little Red Riding Hood. There was once a sweet little girl who lived with her father and mother in a house on the edge of the woods. At the other end of the wood was another pretty cottage where her grandma lived. Everybody loved this little girl, especially Grandma, who gave her lots of nice things. Once, Grandma gave her a red cloak with a hood that she always wore, so people called her Little Red Riding Hood. One morning, Little Red Riding Hood's mother said, "Put on your red cloak and go and see your Grandma. She has been ill. Take along this basket for her." In the basket were eggs and honey. "And don't wander off the path," her mother warned. It was a bright and sunny morning. Red Riding Hood was in such high spirits, she wanted to dance through the wood. All around her grew lovely wild flowers. Little Red Riding Hood could not resist leaving the path to pick a bunch for her Grandma. Little Red Riding Hood had wandered a good distance from the path and was stooping to pick a flower when behind her a gruff voice said,
Good morning, Little Red Riding Hood.
Little Red Riding Hood turned around and saw a great big wolf, but she did not know what a wicked beast the wolf was, so she was not afraid.
What do you have in that basket, Little Red Riding Hood?
Eggs and honey, Mr. Wolf.
Where are you going with them, Little Red Riding Hood?
I am going to my grandma, who is ill, Mr. Wolf.
Where does your grandma live, Little Red Riding Hood?
Asked the sly wolf.
Along that path, past the wild rose bushes, then through the gate at the end of the woods, Mr. Wolf.
Is that so? Well, that sounds like a lovely part of the forest. I hope you enjoy your visit.
Then the wolf said his goodbyes and quickly headed down the path, while Little Red Riding Hood went back to searching for wild flowers. But when he was out of sight, the wolf turned and followed Little Red Riding Hood's directions, and at last came to a cottage with a porch covered in flowers. He knocked at the door.
Who is there?
Called Grandma.
Little Red Riding Hood,
Said the wicked wolf.
Lift the latch and come in, dear.
Said Grandma. The wolf lifted the latch and slinked into where Grandma lay in bed. He pounced, but Grandma quickly leapt out of bed and shut herself in the wardrobe. Then the wolf put on the cap and glasses, which the old woman had dropped, and crept under the bedclothes. In a short while, Little Red Riding Hood knocked at the door and walked in, saying,
Good morning, Grandma. I have brought you eggs, honey and cake. And here is a bunch of flowers I gathered in the wood.
Come closer, my dear.
Are you okay, Grandma?
Just a little hoarse. I've been sick. Please, come closer so that I may see you better.
Little Red Riding Hood stepped closer.
What big ears you have, Grandma.
All the better to hear you with, my dear.
Said the wolf.
What big eyes you have, Grandma.
All the better to see you with, my dear.
Said the wolf.
But, Grandma, what a big nose you have.
All the better to smell you with, my dear.
Said the wolf.
But, Grandma, what big teeth you have.
All the better to eat you up with, my dear.
Cried the wolf as he jumped out of bed.
The wolf! Help!
Little Red Riding Hood dodged and smacked the wolf with the basket. A burly woodsman heard the scream and burst into the room.
Get out, beast!
The wolf ran. The woodsman swung his mighty axe just as the wolf slipped out of the door, catching the tip of his tail.
Thou! Thou! Thou!
The wolf howled as he continued to run, deep into the woods.
Thou!
Everybody was happy to have escaped the wolf's sharp teeth. Afterwards, Little Red Riding Hood hugged her grandma and thanked the woodsman. They all sat down and had tea, and they never saw the wicked wolf again. The end.
Peter Pan.
Peter Pan and Wendy. As he crept around the island known as the Neverland, Peter Pan ticked like a clock swallowed by a crocodile and thought to himself.
Hook or me this time?
He crawled to the shore and into the water, swimming towards the pirate ship called the Jolly Roger. On board, the terrible Captain Hook and his crew had captured Peter's friends the Lost Boys, along with John and Michael, and were preparing to make them walk the plank. By walking the plank, I mean that the pirates would force each Lost Boy to walk out on a narrow board until they fell off the side of the ship into the sea. Wendy was tied up with ropes and forced to watch her brothers and the Lost Boys meet their doom.
So, my beauty, you are to see your children walk the plank.
For Wendy had been pretending that the Lost Boys and her brothers John and Michael were actually her children. Are they to die?
They are.
Don't worry, this was all pretend, of course. But before Hook could send the first Lost Boy down the plank, he heard an awful noise from the water.
The crocodile! The crocodile is about to board the ship!
Hook was deathly afraid of the crocodile.
Hide me!
But before we go any further, perhaps we should explain a few things. Like, who is Wendy? Who is Peter Pan? What's all this with a ticking crocodile? And what is the Neverland? Let's start at the beginning. All children, except one, grow up. Wendy Darling knew when she was 2 years old that she must eventually grow up. 2 is the beginning of the end. Wendy lived with her brothers John and Michael in the nursery on the 3rd floor of their house at number 14. Their nanny was a Newfoundland dog named Nana, who lived in a kennel in the nursery. She walked the children to school, carrying an umbrella in her mouth in case of rain, and always made sure the children were smartly dressed. One night, as the children were sleeping, the windows to the nursery blew open, and in came a boy. It was Peter Pan, along with a strange light, no bigger than your fist, that darted around the room. The light woke Wendy's mother and Nana.
What's that?
Peter Pan leapt out the window, but Nana caught his shadow in her mouth and tore it off. Wendy's mother rolled up the shadow and put it in a drawer for safekeeping. On Friday, 1 week later, Wendy, John and Michael's parents were out at a party. Nana was banished outside for many complicated reasons, none of which were the fault of the dog, and the children were fast asleep in their beds. Suddenly, there was another light in the room, 1,000 times brighter than the children's nightlights. And in the time we have taken to say this, it had been in all the drawers in the nursery looking for Peter's shadow. When the light paused, one could see it was actually a fairy girl called Tinker Bell, dressed in a tiny leaf. Tink found the shadow in a drawer, and Peter tried to reattach it, but he could not. He sat on the floor and sobbed. "Boy, why are you crying?" Peter's sobbing had woken the children.
Who are you?
Wendy Moira Angela Darling. What is your name?
Peter Pan.
Wendy noticed that Peter was trying to get his shadow to stick back on, but could not, so she sewed it for him.
You did it! Oh, thank you!
Where do you live?
Second to the right and then straight on till morning.
What a funny address!
I live there with the Lost Boys, but we have no one there to tell us stories.
I know such a lot of stories. Peter was so excited that he taught Wendy and her brothers John and Michael to fly with the help of a little fairy dust from Tinker Bell, and led them out into the sky towards the Neverland, which was the island on which Peter and the Lost Boys lived.
Hurry up! There are mermaids there, and fairies, and a whole band of pirates led by Captain Hook. He's called that because one time I cut off his arm and fed it to a crocodile. So instead of a hand, he has a big sharp hook. He hates me. He hates that croc too. because ever since the croc's been trying to eat the rest of him, but that crocodile also swallowed a clock, so he goes tick, tick, tick wherever he goes. Hook always hears him coming and escapes. Now, Hook and his pirates are always going round and round the island trying to catch me and the Lost Boys.
Now, I could tell you all kinds of exciting adventures Wendy, John and Michael had while visiting Peter and the Lost Boys on the island. Like swimming in the lagoon with the mermaids, saving Princess Tiger Lily from the pirates, meeting the Neverbird, living in Peter's underground home that you reach by sliding down inside the trunks of trees, playing endless games of make-believe and listening to Wendy's marvelous stories. They were there for weeks and months. I could tell you all about the Lost Boys, Tootles, Nibs, Slightly, Curly and the twins. I could tell you about Hook's scurrilous band of pirates, Checho, Bill Jukes, Cookson, Starkey, Smee, Robert Mullins and Alf Mason. But I think that now it would be the most fun to skip ahead to when Peter, ticking like a crocodile, sneaks aboard the Jolly Roger to rescue the Lost Boys from the plank. When we left Hook on the Jolly Roger, he was hiding from the crocodile behind his crew. As Peter climbed onto the ship, he saw the frightened pirates and thought,
How clever of me, pretending to be the crocodile.
The pirates did not see Peter as he crept onto the ship and stopped ticking. One of them walked by, and Peter flung him overboard. Slightly, one of the Lost Boys started to count.
1.
As Peter snuck into the ship's cabin, Hook decided that the crocodile was gone and resumed preparations for the plank.
Fetch the cat-o'-nine-tails, Jukes. It's in the cabin.
Jukes went into the cabin, and they all soon heard a dreadful screech. Jukes never came back out.
What was that? A ghost must have snuck onto the ship and into the cabin.
2.
Hook sent in Checho to take care of the ghost. Checho did not return.
3. I think I heard you volunteer, Starkey. No, by thunder.
Chased by Captain Hook, Starkey refused to go into the cabin and jumped over the side of the ship.
4.
The ship's doomed. Send in the Lost Boys. Either they'll take care of the ghost in the cabin, or we won't have to make them walk the plank.
The Lost Boys went into the cabin and did not return. But really, they were freed by Peter and stayed with him.
It's the girl! Never was luck on a pirate ship with a woman on board. Fling the girl overboard. There's none can save you now, Missy.
There's one! Peter Pan the Avenger!
Peter flung off his cloak.
Ha-ha! Lost Boys, follow me! Charge!
Peter and the Lost Boys fell to sword fighting with Hook and the remaining pirates. One by one, the pirates were beaten, until only Captain Hook remained. He and Peter were well matched, and fought. And fought. And fought. Until Peter knocked Hook's sword out of his hand.
Pick up your sword so it's a fair fight, Hook.
Ah, good form, Peter. Good form. But a mistake.
Hook lunged at Peter and stabbed, but Peter dodged and Hook kept going, now aiming for Wendy, whose hands were still tied with rope. Wendy turned and gave Hook a swift kick and sent him overboard. You're the captain of this pirate ship no more, Hook!
Ah, ah.
3 cheers for Peter Pan and 3 cheers for Wendy!
After all that adventure, Wendy, John and Michael were ready to go home, and all of the Lost Boys decided to go with them. The children's parents were relieved and delighted to have them back, and welcomed all the lost boys as well. So they all lived happily together, all except Peter, who went back to his home on the Neverland with Tinker Bell to have many, many more adventures, never ever to grow up.
The Tale of Peter Rabbit.
The Tale of Peter Rabbit. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank, underneath the root of a very big fir tree.
Now, my dears,
Said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning.
you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now, run along and don't get into mischief. I'm going out.
Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First, he ate some lettuce and some green beans, and then he ate some radishes. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But just as he got to the end of a row of cucumbers, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting cabbages. But he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out,
Stop! Thief!
Peter was dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and the other shoe among the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on all 4 legs. He was running so fast that he might have gotten away altogether if he had not run into the net that covered the gooseberry bush. He was caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears. Some friendly sparrows overheard his sobs and flew to him in great excitement.
You must get out of there.
Twittered the sparrows.
Mr. McGregor is coming.
Mr. McGregor came up with a bucket, under which he intended to trap Peter. But Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket in the net behind him. Peter dropped to the ground and rushed into the tool shed, leapt into a watering can and ducked down. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each one.
Where are you?
Peter ducked down further and got water up his nose. He sneezed.
Achoo!
Aha!
Mr. McGregor was after him in no time and tried to stomp on Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. So he finally gave up and returned to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had no idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp from sitting in the watering can full of water. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him, and Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his watering cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He went back toward the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a garden hoe. Scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch. Peter scurried underneath the bushes, but since nothing happened, he came out, climbed up into a wheelbarrow, and peeped over the side. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go, along a straight path behind some blackcurrant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor grumbled and hung up Peter's little jacket and the shoes to make a little scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running and did not look behind him until he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking, and she wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a week. Unfortunately, Peter did not feel very well during the evening.
I'm not feeling well, Mother.
His mother put him to bed, made some chamomile tea, and gave a dose of it to Peter.
1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime.
But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail felt marvelous and had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end.